Have you ever seen a powerful person think they're untouchable, only to watch everything crash down in front of their eyes? That's exactly what happened when a homeowners association, better known as an HOA, thought they could use the law as their personal weapon. They believed they could call in the sheriff to intimidate a homeowner. But instead of silencing the person they were after, the whole plan backfired in the most unexpected way. And the one who ended up in handcuffs? Not the homeowner. It was the HOA's very own president. It all started in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where lawns are perfectly cut, fences are all the same height, and neighbors wave politely while secretly competing about who has the greener grass. At first glance, this place looked peaceful, but under the surface, it was a boiling pot of power struggles, petty rules, and one leader who thought she was above everyone else. The president of the HOA, a woman named Linda, was not just strict, she was ruthless. She didn't see herself as a volunteer helping the community. She saw herself as a queen ruling her little kingdom. Every rule was an opportunity to control, and every homeowner was a subject to her power. People in the neighborhood were tired of her constant bullying, but they were also scared. No one wanted to be the target of her wrath. And when she didn't get her way, Linda knew exactly how to escalate things. That's where the trouble began. One homeowner, let's call him David, had finally had enough. He wasn't the kind of person to cause drama, but when Linda came after him for something ridiculous, he stood his ground. What was the issue? His mailbox. Yes, you heard that right. His mailbox wasn't painted the exact shade of beige approved by the HOA. Linda saw it as an opportunity to flex her authority. She started sending him letters, stacking fines, and threatening him with legal action. But David wasn't going to bow down. He knew his rights, and he wasn't afraid to fight back. He calmly explained that the HOA didn't even have the authority to enforce some of the things Linda claimed. He even had paperwork to prove it. Most people would have backed off at that point, but not Linda. No, she doubled down. That's when she made her biggest mistake. Instead of resolving the conflict through proper legal channels, Linda decided to call the sheriff's office. She claimed that David was being aggressive, that he was threatening the community, and that he refused to follow the law. She expected the sheriffs to show up, intimidate David, and put him in his place. She thought the badge would do what her letters and fines could not. But here's the twist. When the sheriffs arrived, they didn't just listen to Linda's side of the story. They talked to David. They looked at the documents. They asked questions. And slowly, the truth started to come out. It turned out that Linda wasn't just exaggerating the rules. She had been misusing HOA funds, falsifying documents, and even signing off on things she had no authority over. The sheriffs realized they weren't dealing with a simple neighborhood dispute. They were looking at something much bigger, something that smelled like fraud and abuse of power. Imagine the look on Linda's face when the sheriffs turned their attention on her. She had called them to take down David. But suddenly she was the one answering tough questions. And the more she tried to talk her way out of it, the deeper she sank. Witnesses came forward. Neighbors whispered about how she had threatened them. Evidence piled up and became impossible to ignore. What happened next shook the entire community. The sheriffs placed Linda under arrest. Right there, in the neighborhood she thought she ruled. The very people she had bullied for years watched as she was led away in handcuffs. Some cheered quietly. Others stood in shock. And David? He finally felt vindicated. The arrest wasn't just about one mailbox. It was about years of abuse, lies, and power games. It showed everyone that no matter how high someone thinks they sit, the law is higher. And sometimes karma doesn't take years. It can arrive in the form of flashing lights and the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. This story is a powerful reminder. When people misuse power, it always comes back to haunt them. Linda believed she could twist the law to crush someone she didn't like, but instead, the law crushed her. And here's the part that makes this even more valuable for you. Whether you've dealt with an HOA, a boss, or any authority figure who abuses their position, the lesson is the same. Stand firm, know your rights, and don't let intimidation silence you. Power without accountability always collapses. So, what do you think? Have you ever seen someone so hungry for control that it became their downfall? And would you have stood up to someone like Linda, or stayed quiet to avoid conflict? Have you ever noticed how one arrest can shake an entire community? What happened in this neighborhood after the HOA president was led away in handcuffs was nothing short of explosive. For years, people have been whispering about corruption, unfair rules, and shady money dealings. But now, those whispers turned into full-blown conversations. And suddenly, everyone wanted to know, how deep did this go? The arrest of Linda, the HOA president, was just the beginning. Once the sheriffs put her in custody, investigators started digging, and what they found was shocking. It turned out that Linda wasn't just abusing her power over mailboxes and fences. She was manipulating the very foundation of the HOA itself. Financial records show that thousands of dollars in HOA dues were unaccounted for. Homeowners have been paying their monthly fees faithfully, believing the money was going toward community maintenance, landscaping, and repairs. But instead, large chunks of it had mysteriously disappeared. Some of it had been spent on personal expenses, shopping, vacations, even a new car that Linda drove proudly while claiming it was for community business. Neighbors were furious. Imagine paying into a system that's supposed to keep your neighborhood safe and beautiful, only to find out your hard-earned money was being used as a private piggy bank. For years, people had suspected something was off, but they didn't have the courage or the proof to speak up. Linda had kept them silent with threats, intimidation, and endless legal warnings. But now, with her in jail, people felt free to tell their stories. One neighbor revealed that she had been fined for planting flowers that weren't on the approved list, even though no such list actually existed. Another admitted that he had been told he couldn't park his truck in his own driveway because Linda didn't like the way it looked. These weren't just rules. They were power plays designed to keep everyone under her control. And here's the kicker. Once the sheriff started listening, more evidence came flooding in. Emails, letters, even recorded phone calls. Linda had been running the HOA like a personal empire, twisting rules and inventing punishments whenever she felt like it. She thought she was too smart to get caught. But the arrest had blown everything wide open. The community itself was in chaos. On one side, people felt relieved. Finally, the nightmare was ending. On the other, there was fear. What would happen now? Who would take over the HOA? And what about all the money that was missing? Some worried that property values would crash. Others worried about lawsuits. For the first time in years, neighbors who had barely spoken to each other gathered in driveways and living rooms, trying to piece together the future of their community. But the most shocking twist was yet to come. During the investigation, officials discovered that Linda hadn't acted alone. There were board members who had signed off on shady decisions, people who had looked the other way, and even a few who had benefited directly from the corruption. It wasn't just one bad leader. It was a network of people who had been quietly enabling her. Some had joined in for personal gain. Others had simply been too scared to challenge her. When the truth came out, the fallout was massive. Several HOA board members were forced to resign. Others faced charges of their own. The entire HOA had to be reorganized from the ground up, with outside oversight to make sure this kind of abuse never happened again. But here's the part that no one expected. Instead of destroying the neighborhood, the scandal actually brought the community closer together. For years, people had lived in fear of speaking up. Now, they found strength in standing united. Homeowners who had barely known each other started working side by side, determined to rebuild trust and take back control of their neighborhood. David, the man who had refused to repaint his mailbox, became something of a local hero. Not because he wanted attention, but because his courage had forced the truth into the open. His quiet resistance showed others that standing up for what's right, even against powerful bullies, can spark real change. The lesson was clear. When people abuse their power, they might get away with it for a while, but eventually the truth comes out, and when it does, the fall is harder than anyone expects. Linda thought she could use the sheriffs to silence her critics. Instead, she ended up exposing her own crimes. She thought fear would keep the community under control. Instead, her arrest gave them freedom. She thought she was untouchable. But no one is untouchable when justice steps in. This story isn't just about an HOA. It's about human nature. It's about how people in positions of authority can either serve or exploit. And it's about how ordinary people Neighbors, friends, families can find their voice when they finally realize they're stronger together. So ask yourself, if you were in this community, would you have stood up earlier? Would you have spoken out when the signs first appeared? Or would you have waited, hoping someone else would fight the battle for you? Backhand index pointing right, don't forget this. Silence only gives power to the wrong people. When you see abuse, when you see corruption, when you see someone twisting rules to harm others, don't stay quiet. Speak up. Take a stand. Because sometimes one small act of courage can topple an empire built on lies. And that's the real heart of the story. The HOA president thought she owned the neighborhood, but in the end, the neighborhood owned its future.